In this video, myself and my dad are going to be installing a diesel heater into a camper van. This is the heater I bought from Amazon for $74.99 and it should come with all the items on screen. First thing you need to do is prep the diesel tank by drilling a hole for the fuel line connector to go into. We drilled an 8mm hole and then threaded the fuel line into the tank to then attach the connector. You can then pull the connector through from the inside, through the hole, and attach an O-ring and then the nut to fasten this into place. Then just push fits into place onto this connector. Next up is to fix the tank into place using the mounting points. We put ours in the back of the van by the wheel arches. Then just thread the fuel line to the front of the van or wherever your heater is going to be mounted. I'll show our route later in the video. We decided to mount the heater onto an MDF box to raise it off the floor, but you can mount it straight onto the van floor. We used a metal mounting plate to mark up the top of our MDF box, to then drill some pilot holes into the van floor so that the exhaust and the air holes will line up with the box. We then drilled these holes through the van using a hole saw. I then marked up the top of the box using the metal plate to mark where to cut out the hole for the heater pipes and the fuel line to fit through. I drilled out each corner, then just used a jigsaw to cut this out. Next up is to attach the heater to the mounting plate. I attach a short piece of fuel line here. This is going to go to the fuel pump. Then attach the exhaust pipe and the air inlet using the supplied Jubilee clips. I then mounted the heater onto the top of our MDF box. We added a side and a base batten to fix the box to.
Oh, can't get in for the batten.
Then attach the side using a 90-degree drill attachment. And then just screwed the top into place. This is where you'll then probably mount the metal fix in place directly onto the floor of your van. We use a hole saw to cut the heater outlet hole, giving this a quick sand smooth, and then drop the heater into place, threading the pipes out through the holes in the van body. Then we just fix the heater into place. The exhaust has a muffler added and the air intake has a small air filter, which are both fixed into place under the van. Next up, we added the other side piece onto the box, drilling a hole through this to thread the short piece of fuel line through. Then this gets attached to the fuel pump and the fuel pump gets fixed into place on the side of this box. The fuel pump has to be mounted at 45 degrees and it's got an arrow to show which way up it needs to be. The fuel pump is then attached by another short piece of fuel line to the fuel filter, which itself is then attached to the fuel line that we threaded through the van from the diesel tank. But first we need to prime the fuel line. So I filled the tank, and then instead of siphoning it, I blew into the fuel tank to force the fuel through, and once it gets to the other end of the line, my dad then attached the fuel line to the filter.
Right, we'll start feeding the fuel line back to you.
Yeah.
Here you can see how we routed the fuel line through the van, making sure it went through conduit in any parts that we thought it might get knocked, all the way to the front where the heater is. On to connecting the electrics now. There's a main wiring harness that has a main heater wiring connection, a connector for the controller, and one for the fuel pump. This main wiring harness has a positive and an earth. You just need to connect the earth to an earthing point. We just used a self-tapper into the body of the van. But you can use any earthing point for this. Then attach the positive cable to the fuse board or directly to the battery, depending on how you're powering. We drilled a hole for the control panel wiring and then mounted the controller plate into place, attaching this onto the main wiring harness, then clipping this into place down the corner of the cupboard.
I have a feeling fixing screws for this might be an issue.
With these heaters, you have to prime the pump when you turn it on, usually by holding these two buttons, but for some reason with this heater this didn't work. We worked out that we just had to turn ours on and then we had to wait for it to prime itself. You know when it's working as you'll hear the fuel pump clicking, and you can see any air being forced through and fuel being sent through to the burner. Once the fuel reaches the burner, you can hear it fire up and the heater should then be working. We did a quick test to see how quickly the van heated up. This is 20 minutes later. It went from 11.4 degrees to 17.9 in 20 minutes, so it shows how effective they are. When you turn the heater off, it continues to run the fan for a few minutes and then it'll switch itself off once everything's cooled down. Hopefully this video's been helpful. If it was, please subscribe to the channel and I'll see you in the next one.